Welcome to the conversation. There are two parts to this session. We have formal presentations in which our speakers will make prepared comments. And then we have our discussion/conversation. During the discussion, we encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A function. And also, we would like for you to be active. The host will promote all attendees to panelists, which means you can raise your hand and ask a question by unmuting yourself. The host will also send a chat note to everyone saying you will receive a request to be promoted as a panelist. Please accept this request. It will enable us to have a discussion during the conversation part of the webinar. You can also use the chat function as well. We will monitor the chat for questions for discussion. In addition, you can use the chat to converse with the other participants. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the Division 52 website at div52.net/webinars. We have also enabled the closed captions. You can activate this in the bottom of your Zoom screen. After the webinar, you will receive an email follow-up with a request to complete an evaluation form. Please complete this. It will help us with our upcoming webinars. Certificates will be sent to everyone who attends for at least 40 minutes. The webinar is scheduled to last for an hour.
Again, welcome to this webinar. Greetings from Antigua, Guatemala. On behalf of Division 52, which is the Society for Global Psychology, we would like to welcome you. This Codapar series, this is a series of conversation hours, webinars by a collaborative group of 7 different divisions of APA. We have representatives of some of those divisions here. The lead organizations were Division 52 and also Division 7, which is the Developmental Psychology Division. We hope that you'll be able to attend the rest of the webinars, but if you miss one, don't worry. They're posted on the Division 52 website. The next one will be on May 27th, and we hope you can join us for that. Welcome again, and we hope you enjoy this conversation.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We are so happy to have Camilla Morelli here speaking with us. Before I introduce her, I'd like to just reiterate that you have gotten an invitation to be upgraded to a panelist for this conversation. That doesn't mean you're going to be on the spot to be a real panelist, but it just means that it'll make it easier to have a conversation. So please say yes to that request to be promoted to panelist. And if you've already said no, you can just send a message in the chat asking to be upgraded to panelist. And I'm glad to see some of you are saying yes. Thank you. So today we have the honor of having Camilla Morelli talk to us from Bristol. And it's not noon there, it is some other time early in the evening, I think. So I got to meet Camilla through reading her book, it got a big award from the Anthropological Association, American Anthropologist. And I read the book and I was just transfixed by what she wrote about and the images that she used in the book, working very closely with the children who were documenting their lives just with sort of photographs that they took. And she's been following them for 15 years, maybe more now. It must be more. But as they have, some of them moved to the edge of little towns and gotten involved with globalization issues, which are so revealing. Um, for me, just the idea that they came from a community with no cash. And now, yeah. So I'm just so happy to have Camilla here. And yes, please go ahead, Camilla.
Thank you so much, Barbara, and thank you. This is such an amazing initiative. Thank you, Judith and Barbara, for inviting me to be part of it. So I will start sharing my screen. Can you all see it? Yeah,
Yes.
great. So, Barbara, you will let me know when I'm halfway through or something, yes?
Yeah, that
Perfect.
sounds
Okay,
good.
so I will just start. Thank you so much again for inviting me. And yeah, so I am Camilla Morelli and I'm a senior lecturer in social anthropology at the University of Bristol in the UK, where it's currently 8 p.m. And yes, so today I want to introduce you to what has been my main research that I have been conducting for 16 years now in Amazonian Peru, working specifically with children and young people. And because I returned, so I started doing this research exactly 16 years ago, but then I lived with a community, a Matses community in Amazonian Peru for a year, but then I return every year there. So I'm going to go actually in 1 month, and I have followed the children's lives and their journeys throughout the years for nearly 2 decades now. So I am going to tell you something about this journey, where it started and where it's going. So I am going to start by showing you one drawing and one quote. Please let me know if you cannot see them. So this is a quote from Margaret Mead, who said that she thought that the reason that boredom is the principal affliction of school children in the United States is that they are bored with the artificial world, and that the artificial world is boring. Which, if you're familiar with the work of anthropologist Margaret Mead, is very unsurprising that she would say that she was writing 100 years ago, and she had this kind of romanticized, slightly, let's say, romanticized view of certain communities that would be sort of farther removed from the artificial world, and the artificial world that children in the United States live in is boring. And this is another quote from Paloma, a 6-year-old Matses girl who's saying, "Concrete is great. I love concrete." And this sentence that I'm translating as "I love concrete," Paloma at the time, so this is a quote from my first fieldwork 16 years ago. And I'm translating this as "I love concrete." Paloma is a Matses girl. So the Matses are an indigenous group who live between Peru and Brazil. And at the time, so 16 years ago, almost no one spoke any Spanish. And so Paloma was speaking in her native language, which is also called Matses, and she was saying "cemento bunchiebi," which means "I love concrete," but more literally, "I am hungry for concrete. I crave concrete." And this is a drawing that Paloma made at the time of Iquitos. Iquitos is the closest city to Paloma's community, to her village in the rainforest. And here you see how she drew these huge houses that are all black. And you can see how she was pushing with that pencil, because she was saying all these houses are amazing because they're made with concrete in the city. And then there are huge lampposts that tower over the houses, because she was saying in the city, unlike the village, there's electricity. So at night you can go out and do things. And then there are those bubble shapes that are cars. And in the middle of the drawing, there's a little car with two people inside, who are Paloma and her mother, driving around the streets of Iquitos. But when Paloma made this drawing, she had never actually been to Iquitos or to any other city. So this was a city as she saw it in her imagination. Paloma's village, well, let's say that now from Bristol I want to get to Paloma's village, I need to get to London and then fly to Lima, the capital of Peru, then take another flight to Iquitos, this city, and then one needs to take another small plane, a military plane that takes you farther into the forest, and then from there is 2 days on a canoe to get to the village where Paloma lives, or at least lived. So it's a far away, it's a very far and long journey. And at the time, especially, it was really expensive. It's not a journey that families could easily afford. And so most children, when I moved there, had never seen a city. And yet the city is everything they talked about pretty much all the time. And so this is the drawing, as you can see it here in its entirety, and that's what Paloma was saying. And Paloma one day asked me, "Is there concrete in your homeland?" And I said, "Yes, Paloma, it's full of concrete, my homeland. Why, do you like it?" And that's when she said, "Yes, I love it. I crave concrete." Even though, again, at the time, Paloma had spent pretty much all of her life in this forest village that you can see here. Paloma's parents and grandparents, who were in the village at the time, they grew up living nomadically inland, in the middle of the forest, so even more remotely compared to the village where Paloma grew up. And they had barely any contact with the outside when they were growing up. And they lived entirely by hunting, foraging wild food, and practicing some very kind of basic horticulture. And whenever I speak with the elders, what they say is that they loved it. That's the life they wanted to have in the forest, foraging, moving around continuously. For various reasons, historical reasons, the generation of Paloma's grandparents decided to end this life of nomadic dwelling in the forest and to settle down in more stable, more permanent villages. And so Paloma's generation grew up still in the rainforest, still in remote communities, but closer to wide rivers and closer, let's say, to non-indigenous territory, as they call it. But what you see there now in Matse society is this huge intergenerational divide, where the grandparents of Paloma grew up in the forest and they cherish the forest. They love it. They have an emotional connection with the forest world. And if I spoke with the elders and we spoke about various topics, they will always find a way to bring the conversation back to the world of the forest. And they will tell me what animals they have been hunting. They will tell me so many stories about their youth in the forest moving around. And that's actually the reason why I started doing research there, because I really wanted to understand how a child that grows up in the rainforest develops an affective relationship with the forest environment. And this is why I really wanted to live with the Matses, because I knew that they lived deep in the forest and they had barely any contact with the outside. And I had my own imagination, probably a bit like Margaret Mead, this construction of what was happening out there. And I had this imagination that, you grow up in a rainforest. What's better than a rainforest? I thought that the children would be in love with the forest, talking about the forest all the time. And when I got there, as I said, I didn't speak any Matses when I got there, and the Matses didn't speak any Spanish, so I had to learn very fast. But the very first word that both me and these Matses children could communicate was Jean-Claude Van Damme, the name of the action movie superstar, because on my very first day that I arrived in the village, the children all ran, to see me, and they wanted to spend time with me, which I thought was great because I was there to work with them. And what they wanted to do is that I had brought digital cameras with me, and they wanted to replicate movie scenes of the Jean-Claude Van Damme movies that they had seen very, very rarely in their life because they can only watch movies when they visit the closest town, which is a very rural, it's not really a town, it's kind of a bigger sort of village, but they address it as a big sort of, they call it Ciotaiano, which means non-indigenous place, and they love to go there. And sometimes they watch these movies, and so they were kind of replicating these Jean-Claude Van Damme movie scenes.
Camilla, that's 10 minutes left.
Perfect, thank you. And on my part, I really wanted to know what they thought of the forest. So I learned all the words to ask about the forest, and I was bombarding them with questions about the forest. So, what do you think about animals? Do you like the forest? Can you trek? Can you collect medicinal plants like your grandparents? And the children, they would just tell me, why do we have to talk about the forest? You come from the city. We could be talking about the coolest things in the world that come from the city. And they will shrug and they will tell me, just go ask my grandparents if you want to talk about the forest. Let's talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme and fun things. And one word that I learned very, very quickly in my fieldwork, one of the first words was Mayan, which means forest spirits. And this is partly because as soon as I arrived there, a girl was taken away by a spirit. She got lost in the forest and she was found many days later somewhere completely, far away from the spot where she got lost. And everybody said it's a spirit that took her away. So I learned this word, the forest spirit, Mayan, and I was asking the children to draw forest spirits. Drawing really helped me in my fieldwork. Because, especially when I could not communicate verbally at the beginning, the children were communicating through images. And like the drawing of Paloma that I showed you before, even though I could speak by that time. And I just kept asking them, draw the forest, draw animals, draw spirits. And I was kind of, I have to say, as an anthropologist, this is the typical kind of anthropologist behavior, but I was feeling quite, not sure what the word is, disappointed or let down or disappointed in myself, let's say, because I had traveled, to the opposite side of the world because I was really interested in how children develop an understanding of local ecologies and of the rainforest. And the children were not interested at all. All they wanted to talk about was the city. And then they drew finally these forest spirits. And one of them on the left, the red one, Trihida drew it. She was 3 years old at the time. And she said, the spirit floats around like a movie character. And the other spirit lives on a tree. This Edward, who was 10 years old at the time, drew the spirit. And this is more traditional because it's a spirit that lives on a tree. But Edward shows these Mayan wearing sunglasses that are the most, for the children at the time, sunglasses were just the most amazing object you could possibly dream of. And in fact, after I took my first break to the city, I went back to the village with boxes of sunglasses for the children who were extremely happy about that. And these are the 2 drawings that really made me think, really made me say, you know what, children, do you want to talk about movies and Jean-Claude Van Damme and the city? I'll stop asking about the forest. Let's just talk about the city. And there's this beautiful quote from Vincent Crapanzano who talks about the imagination as a hinterland, a place that lies elsewhere, but that is also intimately related to the place where people actually live. And what I started seeing is the children's imagination of the city, a city they had never seen, was actually driving the trajectories of their lives towards very specific directions. It was taking them away, projecting them away from the forest, and driving them towards these urban livelihoods. And Vincent Crapanzano continues and says the inaccessibility of the hinterland, so in this case of this faraway city, is terrifying because it reminds us of what we lack in the here and now. And these are 2 drawings. On the right-hand side, you see one of these houses that all look the same. They were made by Erika, a 9-year-old girl, and Erika was saying, all the houses in the city look the same because they're made of concrete, and that's amazing. Whereas in the village that you see in the left, there's no concrete, there are no streets, there's no electricity, all the houses are different. And the children were really starting to place huge moral value on this faraway world. That was also at the same time reminding them of what they were lacking in their everyday villages. And there's this beautiful book. Again, it's a very old book, but it's incredible, by Edith Cobb, The Ecology of Imagination in Childhood, who says that child imagination is an act of world making. And this is exactly what I was seeing with Matz's children. The Matzes were constructing this world of the city that, in a sense, was more valuable, was more desirable in many ways than life in the forest. When I was asking the children what they wanted to do when they will grow up, none of them was saying, I want to be a hunter and live in the forest. And none of them was learning how to hunt, because Matz's children live in what Barbara Rogoff has defined a Lopi society, so a place where you learn by doing things, by observing and pitching in. And because the children were not going to the forest with their parents and grandparents, they were not learning anything about it. But meanwhile, they were spending all this time daydreaming about this place of opportunities that is the city. A city, again, where they had never been. And what I saw...
5 minutes left.
Thank you. And what I saw throughout the years, is that the children grew up and they were no longer children, and they started actually moving. As soon as they were turning 18, they were the first generation that was actually moving to the city. And when they got to the city, so these are photographs that they took in these slums where they were living. And again, I absolutely don't want to portray a kind of romanticized, idyllic view of life in the villages. But what they do say themselves, the young people I work with, is that in the village, in the forest, let's say, they will never be hungry. They will never be lonely. They will never need any kind of basic things that you need in life. In the city, they told me that at night, they very often couldn't sleep when they first moved there because they were too hungry to fall asleep, because they didn't have any money, because they thought, we will move to the city and we will just get a job there. And then they arrived there again, they had never been, and they realized that you need to speak Spanish very well, and that finding a job is hard, and that everything is money, they were saying. And then in the village, they practice what anthropologists call a sharing economy, where nothing is really yours. Everybody owns everything in a sense, to simplify hugely. And so they will go to the city and see these shops, and this is what they told me very often. They will see these shops full of stuff, and they were owned by one person who wouldn't share it with anyone. And they were telling me, I thought that that's a horrible way to be. I thought these people are really horrible people that keep their stuff and don't share it. And different things started to happen at that point. And there are many stories that I have, unfortunately, recorded of really kind of sad, very sad stories, let's just say. At the same time, a lot of the young people that moved to the city managed to get scholarships to study at university. And we met there, we met in the city. And again, I go every year, so we're always in contact. And because they were not children anymore, they were young people, young adults, it was possible to have a very open conversation with them on, what kind of research would you like to do? And especially because they were now university students, it was possible to really define a kind of research trajectory that will benefit them. And so I started applying for bigger fundings where these young people were participating as research associates. And where from using drawing and photography, I started using co-production of animation. So what I do now in my work is that I bring together these teams of artists and animators. One comes with me from Bristol, and the others are local, indigenous, Amazonian or Peruvian artists and researchers. And together, we teach children, children as well, but also especially young people and young adults, how to produce animated films from start to finish, so that by the end of these workshops, this training, this research, they know how to make a film. And they use the films to tell all of these stories that they have, all of this journey that in a large extent remains untold. And this is our project. We called it Animating the Future. And I will conclude by showing you one of these young people. This is Roldan Desi, who was one of those children playing and daydreaming about the forest when I moved there. And here you see us presenting together at Roldan's very first conference, academic conference. And Roldan had many obstacles in his path, but then he got a scholarship and he had to choose a subject. And he heard about anthropology and thought, anthropology sounds cool, let's study that. And as we speak, Roldan is in Brazil. He's in Peru conducting fieldwork for his PhD in anthropology that he's completing. And we just published an article together where he's the first author, because the best ideas are 100% his. And you see a drawing in a film, in one of the animations that he directed, where he picture himself becoming the first anthropologist and the first doctor in his community, because most people haven't finished secondary school in the whole of the Matses population. So he will become the first anthropologist, academic, PhD holder. And he drew himself wearing this graduation outfit, but he carries in his hand the bow and arrow of his grandparents. So he will continue with this kind of, and bring forward this indigenous heritage while achieving a new life in the city. So I will end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Camila. We would like to open this up so that it's a general conversation that would involve whatever this material that Camila has presented to us, as well as just the expertise of all of you in the group. You can turn on your camera if you'd like. Those of you who would like to be, those of you who are not didn't say yes to being a panelist, you can still do it just by asking for that in the chat. But even if you're not in among the people on the screen, you can still, Kendra, is this right? They can still raise their hand and speak?
Yes, they can. I'm watching the chat and the hand signals.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So this is just a place for us to have a conversation, given what Camila has started us off. My question for Camila, I'll start what people are thinking. That image, that last image you showed us of the kid with the PhD, was that an animation?
Yes, that's an animation that Roldan directed. So when we have these smaller groups, essentially, because these are young people, they learn about digital techniques in half an hour, and then they go off and they just do. So when we have big groups of participants, they are divided into different groups, and every group chooses a topic on which film they want to produce. And this is a film about a young man who leaves the village, like many of them, the same path that many of them had, leaves the village. And another scene in the animation is that one thing that they were discussing actually in this work is that it's not fair, or at least there's a huge imbalance in how knowledge is understood globally. Because if one wants to do a PhD, so the higher possible, highest degree of education, they need to go outside because there is this idea that the real knowledge is outside of the communities. And they were saying, actually, no, our, grandparents have huge knowledge. And what they drew, or what they animated, was a research center established in the Amazon rainforest with foreign funding, of course, as it's fair, where researchers will go from outside, bringing in resources, but learning from local knowledge. So, yes.
Wow. Wow. So, well, congratulations on that. Let me see if other people have questions or comments. You don't have to direct them to Camilla, but that was so interesting. I'm sure a lot of you have comments or questions for Camilla also. So let me just pause and see who has something you'd like to bring into the conversation.
Barbara, there are a couple of questions in the chat. I just wanted to highlight that.
Oh, I didn't see those. Okay. Um, so Judy Gibbons, why don't you just say your question?
Well, I'm so curious what Roldan would take from his experience. If he were to go back to the village and talk to the younger children, what would he advise them? Would he encourage them to go to the city? Would he encourage them to get education? I always wonder about the expertise again among the children that have lived the experience.
So thank you. This is actually a very much debated. It's one of the key topics of discussion amongst these young migrants who leave the village and go to the city. They talk a lot about the importance of giving back to their communities. So they feel really, and a lot of them feel heartbroken by the fact that they had left the community behind, so to speak. So they really want to go and give something back. And we work a lot with women, with young women who are incredible women. And they really talk a lot about the importance of going back and telling girls and giving girls an education to the city. Because, for example, the Matzes tradition, like the Paloma's parents, they started having children when they were 14, which it wasn't just good, it was necessary because otherwise the economy in a subsistence economy wouldn't function. The kids, at 14, you're on your own. You need to start your own family and your own economic household. But now what these girls are saying is, if you have children at 14, what happens is that when you're 20, your partner goes to the city and you are left behind with 3 children, and maybe your partner leaves you, and it's all, it's very, very complicated. And so they're saying we need to go and tell the girls that they might want to study, but they also, they're very critical, and they also know that they need to do it in a very kind of, let's say, indigenous way. So not in a kind of in a way that will respect the local moral values of the community. And Roldan is actually in it because Roldan is doing his PhD fieldwork in his own community. So he's there now, and we are meeting in June. When I go, we will meet there, which will be, almost 16 years after my fieldwork. He will be there doing fieldwork. It will be fantastic.
Thank you.
Martha, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I was just curious. You had said that the children didn't want to discuss the forest like you had asked. So I was wondering how you adjusted or if you did adjust your research at that point.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, it took me a little while. Like it took me maybe a couple of weeks of trying and saying, come on, let's just talk about the forest a little bit. But then, no, and I was, I was very young at the time. I was reading a lot. There was this kind of idea that if you are an anthropologist that goes to Amazonian, you need to read I don't know, about animism and perspectivism and all of that stuff. And so I really wanted to know about the forest. And I felt like a failure. I felt like I chose the wrong place. I cannot do this. This is too much. This is too difficult. I was 24 in this place I had never been. I didn't speak the language. I didn't know anyone. I was really struggling. But then when those two children made those two drawings of the spirits, I said, let's talk about what you want to talk about. I'm curious actually to know where you want to get to. And yes, and then I wanted to write a book about the forest, and I ended up writing a book about children and their imagination of the city, while still, of course, talking about the forest with the parents and the grandparents because they wanted to talk about the forest. So
You're muted, Martha.
Thank you for sharing your development as a researcher too.
thank you.
Karina, you want to make your point?
Sure. Thank you, Camila. That was a great talk. And I really appreciate the sort of length of time that you dedicate to this. And I think that's what I'm most curious about is over the time of your visits, have you noticed changes in children's responses? I'm thinking about sort of the community's exposure to urban settings. And for example, the example with the sunglasses I thought was great. And I'm wondering if over time, given that perhaps older siblings migrate and return, or the exposure changes, and in what ways have you seen that come up with the children that are there today, like the little ones?
Yes. The fascination for the city, if anything, has amplified. The parents are hugely struggling because traveling to the city has become slightly easier to just go and come back. And they really struggle with taking children there because children throw these tantrums because they want stuff in the city. So they want to buy bread and to buy rice and to buy toys, and the parents just cannot afford it. And so that's a real struggle. A lot of people have moved out. A lot of young people have just left the villages and just moved to the city altogether. So there is this sense, and everybody's talking about it, of how the villages are becoming empty in a sense, which is. But one thing I'm really happy that kind of happened, it was totally unplanned, but it happened, is that I gave the children digital cameras because, the world I saw 16 years ago. I mean, again, not to go Levi Strauss now, but it's kind of changed. Even just the architecture has changed completely. Certain houses that were there 16 years ago are not there anymore. But what we did is that because I had these digital cameras and the children loved them, the children took all of these photos of the villages and these kind of traditional things. And now that they become researchers, this is all an archive that they can have. And it's their own archive. They took the photographs. So this is actually one of my key things I want in the future is get some funding to create this data set properly so that they can fully have it and it's their own documentation of their society, which in 15 years probably will be like completely different.
I wonder if any of the people in our webinar have had similar experiences, either from the point of view of a researcher or as a point of view of somebody who grew up in a community that it all resembles what Camilla is talking about. And just wondering if you've seen something similar.
I would just share that the reason that I was so drawn to the sunglasses example is because my mom has a similar story about broccoli when she was a child and she lived in an orphanage in Mexico. and that there were like missionaries who came and brought broccoli. And she said, I was so hungry and so excited that they were bringing food. They said, you eat this. And that she ate it upside down. She ate the stalk part. And she said, she had a wiggly tooth and she lost her tooth that day from the stalk, you know? Yeah. So she had shared that with us when we were very young about the value of food and all of these other things, right? It's a story we've heard many times, but hearing your example about the sunglasses made me think about that was her first exposure with American culture, American food, and that's how she interpreted it, but that it yeah, so that was a parallel that I saw just from that example.
Thank you for sharing this story. This is a beautiful story.
Tony, go ahead.
I had just put in the chat that I find this very fascinating, Camilla. I so appreciate you sharing it with us. I think that, we're often taught that indigenous children or children who live in these villages are very happy to be there, and I don't mean that they're not happy to be there, but that longing that we all have to be somewhere else, you know, I think really is fascinating to me, because I thought when you started talking, I thought, wait, they want concrete? Okay. But I think there's something universal there that we all as children fantasize about, something different than what we have. So I just found a common, sort of a universality there, in that. And I wonder if you have thoughts about that.
Yes, I mean, it's like if we think the thing also is that there are some aspects of the urban culture and life that, like watching a movie. I mean, we
Mhm.
watch movies all the time and we take it completely for granted because they're available. But, a Matz's child that never watches movies and then goes and watch, I mean, watching a movie is great and they love it. And young people want to use the internet, obviously. And this is one of the most, striking things I've seen in 16 years, that I've seen communities that didn't have running water, which is a lot, having access to clear kind of clean water, and they were poor and they have remained living in poverty, if not below. They still don't have running water, but every single person there has a smartphone. The smartphone has become, you cannot live, if you're a young, anyone, below, I don't know, maybe 25 or needs an iPhone, a smartphone. So smartphones are everywhere. Even in the villages in the forest where there's no internet, um, everybody needs to have a smartphone. So capitalism is a very alluring. So
Judy, would you share your story?
Yes, this is just a minor anecdote, but it resonated. Your comments about you went to study one thing and the children didn't want to talk about that. I've been working in a Maya community for many years, mostly asking about developmental psychology, generational differences, what children want education or they don't, what their plans are for the future. And then I started just a small study about the traditional Maya clothing, traje, they call it, and how there are changes in the clothing. Well, my research assistant, who's a member of the community, said, well, finally, you're studying something interesting. So it was just like, I mean, we have to learn, we have to listen to our participants. That was the point.
And
Thank
actually,
you.
something happened. Oh, sorry, something happened to me that was completely unexpected. So, since I started working in the communities, the children and the young people were extremely, like, they thought that the things I can do, like use a laptop, at least at the time, 16 years ago, they thought this is incredible. I want to know how to use a laptop. The elders, not really. The elders think that using a laptop is ridiculous and what's the value of that? And they always made fun of me because they say, you're clumsy, we can't even leave you alone, you will get lost, you will get eaten by some jaguar, we need to constantly look after you. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, it's actually Matses elders who came up to me and said, you know what? The kids love doing this stuff, this animation film stuff. So why don't you make some of these films about traditional myths that are being complete? The myths are disappearing essentially. It's a bad way to say it, but that's what's happening. And for the Matses and all Amazonian communities, the mythology is history essentially. So this is like if tomorrow all our history books get burnt. You will see a global movement. This is like if tomorrow the Colosseum is set on fire, there will be money flying in from every corner of the world. And meanwhile, there is this traditional knowledge there that is like, it is their heritage, their knowledge that is just going away, and there is no effort whatsoever, but also it's something that is not known, it's not communicated, and the elders are so worried. And they did tell us, make animations about these myths. So the kids put them in their phones, and at least they learn the myths that way. And we started, and I'm hoping, so what we started doing then is that we are working with the Ministry of Education, and we are putting in this methodology. So we are teaching the methodology to people who train indigenous teachers, so that then they're teaching of course, without me. Like I never wanted this work to be depending on me being there, otherwise it would be pointless. So this kind of keeps going, and hopefully this documentation, at least for a little bit, will happen. I don't know, but yes.
So I'm going to jump to Emmanuel, who is working with Indigenous folks in. You knew I was going to do that, right, Emmanuel?
Uh,
Could you connect with what you're doing?
yeah, there is a lot that I can connect with my own work. And I appreciate how you describe this longing, because I also see it with the children that I've been working with. This like longing for something else. But what's interesting is that they use technologies to kind of manifest that longing, right? Kind of what you're doing with the animation. So I think one question that I also have for you is how do you see digital technologies kind of shifting that relationship, not only in kind of manifesting that longing, but also do you see that it also kind of creates a relationship, a different form of relationship to their home community? Like, do you see that longing for the concrete being, something that you're looking at, but also the longing to be back in their community through the use of technology?
Thank you, Manuel. It's really nice to see you, by the way. So yes, I mean the thing is that technology, that there are so many opportunities there, so much potential, so many things that they could be used in, and there are many, because now I don't just work with the Matses. We do these workshops with different groups of people across Amazonia. And there are many, for example, when we work with the Shipibo are they're artists. Almost every single one of them is an artist in a way or another. And they are, they're doing, they're calling this particular kind of figure the activista audiovisual. And so there's this kind of activism that is precisely done through filmmaking, through audio production, through all of these. And I don't know, I just think, I just see what they do, and I just cannot believe that the world, the entirety of the world, is not paying more attention, investing more resources. It's just because it's just incredible work. And yes.
Yeah, I also think that the design, right? That design process, how like they come up with these, wonderful ideas of how to represent their imagination through technologies is just one of the things that I'm just in awe with, both what the children do in the communities that I work with in Oaxaca, but also the teachers, right? And kind of the affordance that technology has brought into to kind of create different forms of relationship, not only with knowledge, but with like with the communities, with with their futures. And yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Thank you. And I do also think that this kind of audiovisual work does have a very strong LOPI component because it's very practice based. And so by observing and then, actually making it, then you learn in a whole new way, in a sense. So,
I'm going to ask Gloriana, if you're willing to mention your work with social media, TikTok, and community. Um, do you have an observation or a question? I don't know if you are able to do that, but I'd like to open it up for you if you could. I think you just have to unmute if you do have something that you wanted to. I think you just unmute yourself and you can speak. Or else maybe the host can make you a panelist.
Gloriana?
Yes. Oh, you don't have a microphone. Okay, well, that makes it difficult. Um, okay. I'm following you on the chat. So while this is happening, we are trying really hard to figure out how to have conversations on a webinar. And so part of what you're seeing with that invitation to be a panelist and what Gloriana is trying to do here is it's a good illustration of how the structure of the digital world and other institutions are just a part of what we have to deal with because it's trying to make us have just talks where one person does all the talking and everybody else does all the listening. And it's we have been trying to be creative about trying to make this possible as a conversation. And I see Gloriana has succeeded.
Yeah, thank you. I do work on social media. I've been doing like an ethnography on TikTok particularly, and I've seen a lot of youth from indigenous communities posting content and educating people on TikTok, which I find really fascinating. I think one of the things that I think about a lot is like how our perspective is a conservationist perspective, like we want them to conserve the culture. Um, and I wonder, like, because I think about a lot, like being Mexican and coming to the US and kind of looking at my cousins and stuff in Mexico and kind of wanting them to preserve the culture, but they want it to be more like American. Like I wonder, like do you feel like what are your thoughts about like wanting to push for people conserving the culture, but like is there any like feelings about like selfishness in some way? I'm just thinking about that as we were talking about.
thank you, Gloriana. Yes, I know your work. It's fantastic. So the interesting thing for me is that this idea of leaving something behind is something that comes. It's that these young people talk about so much, but only when they actually make a successful living in the city. So up until that point, they speak their language. Now that they are they are successful. A lot of them are hugely successful. Um, and now they're becoming worried about the future because they're like, oh, all this stuff that my grandparents knew, it's gone. And when they die, and in fact, when we put this funding together with my collaborators in Peru, I got there and it happened, it started during the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic. So I thought, okay, and then we couldn't do anything for a year, and then we had our first animation workshop, and I went there and I said, okay, so we are talking about the future. The project is called Animating the Future. Let's draw a future and animate a future that you imagine. And the first thing that everybody wanted to do was an animation about an origin myth. I had never heard them mention an origin myth ever, but in the city, all of a sudden, this, as their lives are moving towards new destinations, I guess, there is this feeling of the roots are being forgotten. And this is and there's some incredible work that I read from in North American indigenous anthropologists that's actually some of the very few works that exist in the world that are saying that this is the primary reason for mental health issues amongst indigenous youth, at least in North America. But there's an idea that it's everywhere. That is, indigenous youth after everything, they go to the city, they migrate, and then there's this feeling of leaving the heritage behind, and this is causing mental health issues. So. Yeah.
So when you say origin myths, they're wanting to animate some of the origin myths, or how does it happen?
Yes, so I remember the very first day we did this workshop, the animator started teaching them how you make an animation, and then they all made their drawings, and they came back the day after, and we said, so what do you want to make? And they said this myth about how the world started. So the beginning of everything couldn't get all, in a project on the future. But I think that's because that is the future. There is no future if this knowledge is gone. And the way they say it is, my grandparents can tell these stories, and only they can. And when they die, they're gone. And so this is a discourse that I completely see what Gloriana is saying. That's such a good point in how to talk about these things. But in this case, it's these young people saying, feeling anxiety in really towards this uncertainty of a future where this knowledge is threatened, essentially.
I'm thinking about in the Mayan town where I've been working for many years. I think it's the people who've been to university who are the most likely, the Mayan folks in this town who've been to university, who are most commonly the people who want to preserve, to go back um, to not lose the ancient ways. Is that the case also for the, is university part of this?
It could be because most of the people I work with now are university students who, in a sense, are also and this is well, not all of them, but a big part. And this I've taken as one of my failures, let's say, in recent years, in the sense that I have not managed probably to include other of these young people who have made different choices. We tried in all sorts of ways, but it was very difficult. And these university students are hugely keen, and then we co-publish, and then they're really keen to do this kind of projects. And yes, it's exactly that. There's a discourse there on the importance of this knowledge. So,
We are about to end, but I wonder if I can ask if what you see as your role in these changes.
in the sense in pushing a kind of urban imagination, Barbara, or
Not on purpose necessarily, but yeah.
yeah. I don't know, because this is what everybody asked me especially at the beginning, they were saying, "Oh, surely the kids talk about the city because you're the city person and you were there." Um, I, the thing is, it was huge. It was undeniable. It was so obvious that the city was everything. And in all different villages where I had not been, there was this. Um, so I don't know. Um, I don't know if I know how to answer that, but
Yeah.
I think that it would have probably been impossible for only one person to influence, if you saw the children, the way they talked about the city, their eyes just lightened up. Yes, they loved it. And it was undeniable. And it was also, again, watching a film is nice. And so if that's kind of where they wanted to go, I think it just shouldn't, the world shouldn't be such that then they ended up being hungry in the slums. But yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us today, for what you shared with us, and for the work that you're doing. And I think maybe the host have something they wanted to say to finish. I think you may get an email asking for your evaluation of the session. I think that's what I was thinking they might add. So Camila, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here and making this a conversation.
This was great.
Yeah,
Thank you all for coming. It was great. Super.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Judith. It was really, such a nice group such a nice group of people.
I,
Emmanuel,
it-
how's it going?
Good, good. I'm gonna email you so we can connect.
Perfect,
Yes,
perfect. Yes,
perfect.
do.
All
Yeah,
right.
so we have
Have a good
chat.
day, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for, oh,
Mila,
Hila.
Barbara.